I'd like you to say this with me on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. If it's meant to be, it's up to me.
You don't take responsibility for your actions at the time you're caught. You take responsibility for your actions at the time you perform those actions.
Well, there's a deep idea in the West too. It's like, pick up your damn suffering and bear it and try to be a good person so you don't make it worse.
And with its gunfire and enemy attacks and screaming men and blood and death, and in that fog of war, through a series of mistakes and human error and poor judgment and Murphy's Law and just plain bad luck, a horrendous firefight broke out. But this firefight, it wasn't between us and the enemy. This firefight, tragically, was between us and us. Friendly forces against friendly forces. Fratricide. The mortal sin of combat. And the most horrific part of war. And when it was over, and the fog of war lifted, one friendly Iraqi soldier was dead, 2 more were wounded, one of my men was wounded, the rest of my SEALs were badly shaken. And it was only through a miracle that no one else was killed. And it was reported up the chain of command what had happened. That we had fought and wounded and killed each other. And when we got back to base, things didn't get much better. There was a message waiting for me from my commanding officer. And it said, shut down all operations. It said that the commanding officer, the master chief, and the investigating officer were inbound to my location. And they told me to prepare a debrief to explain exactly what had happened on the operation and what had gone wrong. Now, I knew what this meant. It meant that somebody had to pay. It meant that somebody had to be held accountable. It meant that somebody had to get fired for what had happened. So, I began to prepare my debrief. And in it, I detailed every mistake that was made and who made it. And I pointed out every failure in the planning and the preparation and the execution in the operation. And I pointed out who was responsible for that failure. There was plenty of blame to go around. There were so many people that I could incriminate with guilt. But something wasn't right. For some reason, I just couldn't put my finger on who was at fault and who specifically I should blame for what had happened. And I sat and I went over it again and again, and I struggled for an answer. And then when I was about 10 minutes from starting the debrief, that answer came, and it hit me like a slap in the face. And I realized that there was only one person to blame for the confusion, only one person to blame for the wounded men, and only one person to blame for the dead Iraqi soldier. And I knew exactly who that person was. And with that knowledge, I walked into the debriefing room with my commanding officer, and the master chief and the investigating officer were sitting there waiting for me, along with the rest of my men, including my SEAL that had been wounded, who was sitting in the back of the room with his head and his face all bandaged up. And I stood up before them and I asked them one simple question. Whose fault was this? One of my SEALs raised his hand. And he said it was my fault. I didn't keep control of the Iraqi soldiers I was with. And they left their designated sector, and that was the root of all these problems. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault. And then another SEAL raised his hand and said it was my fault. I didn't pass our location over the radio fast enough so no one knew what building we were in, and that's what caused all this confusion. It was my fault. And I said, no, it wasn't your fault either. And then another SEAL raised his hand. And he said, boss, this was my fault. I didn't properly identify my target. And I shot and killed that friendly Iraqi soldier. This was my fault. And I said, no, this wasn't your fault either. And it wasn't yours or yours or yours, I said as I pointed to the rest of the SEALs in the room. And then I told them that there was only one person at fault for what had happened. There was only one person to blame. And that person was me. I am the commander. I am the senior man on the battlefield, and I am responsible for everything that happens. Everything. And then I went on to explain to them some new tactics, techniques, and procedures that we were going to implement to ensure that this kind of travesty never happened again. And I will tell you something, it hurt. It hurt my ego. It hurt my pride to take the blame. But I also knew that to maintain my integrity as a leader and as a man, I had to take responsibility. And in order to do that, I had to control my ego so that my ego did not control me. And you know what? I didn't get fired. In fact, my commanding officer, who had expected excuses and finger pointing, when I took responsibility, when I took ownership, he now trusted me even more. And my men, they didn't lose respect for me. Instead, they realized that I would never shirk responsibility. And I would never pass that heavy burden of command down the chain and onto them. And you know what? They had the same attitude. Unlike a team where no one takes ownership of the problems and therefore the problems never get solved, with us, everyone took ownership of their mistakes. Everyone took ownership of the problems. And when a team takes ownership of its problems, the problems get solved. And that is true on the battlefield, it is true in business, and it is true in life. So I say, take ownership. Take extreme ownership. Don't make excuses. Don't blame any other person or any other thing. Get control of your ego. Don't hide your delicate pride from the truth. Take ownership of everything in your world, the good and the bad. Take ownership of your mistakes, take ownership of your shortfalls, take ownership of your problems, and then take ownership of the solutions that will get those problems solved. take ownership of your mission. Take ownership of your job, of your team, of your future, and take ownership of your life. And lead. Lead. Lead yourself and your team and the people in your life. Lead them all.
First principle, you can't hire other people to do your push-ups for you, right? Which leads into take 100% responsibility for your life and your results. 100%. See, there's people out there going, oh, the speaking business is tough because of the economy. The speaking business is tough because of you guys. There's so many of you now. There's so much competition. Every CEO, every retired athlete, every retired movie star becomes a speaker. That's exciting. It's telling people this is the educational world. More education happens in hotel rooms like this than will ever happen in a school in America every day. It's amazing. So there's a huge market, and we're expanding that market all the time. So no blaming, no complaining. I want you to act as if, no matter what happens to you, you say, how did I create that? How did I create that? Ask yourself that question. 95% of the time, you're going to find the answer. We want to blame someone else. Blame my wife, blame my kids, blame the economy, we blame astrological signs. We blame our cycle. And we blame something all the time. There's some other reason other than us, right? The point is, it's you. And if you act as if it's you, even if a plane crashed into this hotel and 4 of us died, you could ask yourself the question, gee, how did we create that? Because if you ask yourself the question, you're likely to find some answers. And then next time you can stop creating that. It's really important to not blame, not complain.
I read a lot about the terrible things that people have done to each other. You just cannot even imagine it. It's so awful. So you don't want to be someone like that. Now, do you have a reason to be? Yes! You have lots of reasons to be. God, there's reasons to be resentful about your existence. Everyone you know is going to die. You know, you too. And there's going to be a fair bit of pain along the way, and lots of it's going to be unfair. It's like, yeah, no wonder you're resentful. It's like, act it out and see what happens. You make everything you're complaining about infinitely worse. There's this idea that hell is a bottomless pit, and that's because no matter how bad it is, some stupid son of a bitch like you could figure out a way to make it a lot worse. So you think, well, what do you do about that? Well, you accept it. That's what life is like. It's suffering. That's what the religious people have always said. Life is suffering. Yes. Well, who wants to admit that? Well, just think about it. Well, so what do you do in the face of that suffering? Try to reduce it. Start with yourself. What good are you? Get yourself together for Christ's sake so that when your father dies, you're not whining away in a corner and you can help plan the funeral and you can stand up solidly so that people can rely on you. That's better. Don't be a damn victim. Of course you're a victim. Jesus, obviously. Put yourself together. And then maybe if you put yourself together, you know how to do that. You know what's wrong with you, if you'll admit it. You know there's a few things you could polish up a little bit, that you might even be able to manage in your insufficient present condition. And so you might shine yourself up a little bit, and then your eyes will be a little more open, then you can shine yourself up a little bit more, and then maybe you could bring your family together instead of having them be the hateful, spiteful, neurotic, infighting batch that you're doomed to spend Christmas with. So then you fix yourself up a little bit, kind of humbly, because, God, you're a fixer-upper if there ever was one. And then you got to figure out, well, can you figure out how to make peace with your idiot brother? And probably not, because he's just as dumb as you, so how the hell are you going to manage that? And so then maybe you get somewhere that way, and your family's sort of functioning, and you find out, well, that kind of relieved a little bit of suffering, although it reduced the opportunities for spiteful revenge, and that's kind of a pain in the neck. And so then you get your family together a little bit, and you're a little clued in then, at least a bit, because you've done something difficult that's actually difficult. You're a little wiser, and so then maybe you could put a tentative finger out beyond the family and try to change some little thing without wrecking it. It's like, Our society is complex, and we teach our students that they could just fix it. It's like, go fix a military helicopter and see how far you get with that. It's like, what are you going to do? You're like a chimp with a wrench. Whack! Oh look, it's better! It's like, no! It's not better. Things are complicated, and to fix things is really hard. And you have to be like a golden tool to fix things, and you're not. So, and that's the other message of the West. It's like, how do you overcome the suffering of life? And I'm not saying it's only the message of the West. How do you overcome the suffering of life? Is be a better person. That's how you do it. Well, that's hard. It takes responsibility. And I think, if you said to someone, you want to have a meaningful life? Everything you do matters. That's the definition of a meaningful life. But everything you do matters. So you're going to have to carry that with you. Or do you want to just forget about the whole meaning thing, and then you don't have any responsibility because who the hell cares, and you can wander through life doing whatever you want, gratifying impulsive desires for how useful that's going to be, and you're stuck in meaninglessness, but you don't have any responsibility. Which one do you want? Well, ask yourself, which one are you pursuing? And you'll find very rapidly that it isn't the majority of your soul that's pursuing the whole meaning thing, because, well, look what you have to do that. You have to take on the fact that life is suffering. You have to put yourself together in the face of that. Well, that's hard. Christ, it's amazing people can even do it. I'm stunned every day when I go outside and it isn't a riot with everything burning. Because really, God, you talk to people, it's like, I knew this guy, he'd been in a motorcycle accident and it really ruined him, and he was like a linesman, working on the power, and he was working with someone who had Parkinson's disease, and they had complementary inadequacies, and so two of them could do the job of one person, and so they're out there fixing power lines in the freezing cold, despite the fact that one was 3/4 wrecked with a motorcycle accident and the other one had Parkinson's. It's like, that's how our civilization works. It's like, there's all these ruined people out there, they've got problems like you can't believe. Off they go to work and do things they don't even like, and look, the lights are on. My God, it's unbelievable. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. And we're so ungrateful. College students, the postmodern types, they're so ungrateful. They don't know that they're surrounded by just a bloody miracle. It's a miracle that all this stuff works. That all you crazy chimpanzees that don't know each other can sit in the same room for 2 hours sweltering away without tearing each other apart, because that's what chimps do. So, anyways, so what happened? Well, I made some videos and I got to the bottom of some things, at least as far as I can tell, so I told you what the bottom is, and then I got this idea about what you might do about it, which isn't my idea. It's not my idea. It's an old idea. It's far older than Christianity. It's old. It's the oldest story of mankind. Get yourself together. Transcend your suffering. See if you can be some kind of hero. Make the suffering in the world less.
He goes, no, you don't understand. He said, when we approached him and said, did you fall asleep on watch? He denied it. And when we asked him again, he denied it again. And only when we gave him irrefutable proof that he had fallen asleep on watch did he say, I want to take responsibility for my actions. And the problem we have is you don't take responsibility for your actions at the time you're caught. You take responsibility for your actions at the time you perform those actions. They had another Marine who fell asleep on watch, and they approached him and they asked him, and he said, yes, I did, and he was punished, and they have no problem with him. And you see, it's all about trust. It's all about trust. When they put these group of men or women into a combat situation, the people who follow these people, if these people choose to be leaders, if they want to be officers, they have to know, their people have to know that if something goes wrong or if something goes bad, that these people will be honest with them. That if they turn their backs, that something, and that they have to trust these people. In a combat situation, when you're in a foxhole with somebody, you have to know to the core of your being that someone wouldn't say something just to protect themselves, but they would say something to protect you. This is what leadership is. It's a funny thing to talk about leadership, or even to aspire to it, when we don't really know what it is. You know, the question is, why do we need leaders? Like, who cares? Aren't we all equals? Aren't we all competent? Why do we even need leaders? And the answer is actually very simple. If you go back historically, back to the beginnings of the sort of the birth of man, you find out why we evolved into these hierarchical animals, and we absolutely are hierarchical animals. If you put a group of people in a room and say you guys are all equals, it's just not true. We will always find a way to create a hierarchy amongst ourselves. Who's the dominant one? Who's the submissive one? You know, the alpha, who's the strong one in the room? And the whole concept of leadership and hierarchy evolved many thousands of years ago for a very simple reason. It was very practical, actually. When we lived in groups of 50 to 100, but rarely more than 150, if someone came in with a carcass or a big bag of berries that they had gone picking that day, and we're all hungry and we all rush in for food, what's going to happen? We're going to start shoving and pushing. And if you happen to have been born a little stronger, you know, you're going to keep shoving out everybody else. And the problem is you'll always eat, but no one else will. And so we evolved into these hierarchical animals where we allow the alphas, we allow the strong ones to eat first, and we sort of hang back and wait for them to finish. And the deal was they got first choice of meat and first choice of mate. And even though we didn't get first choice of meat or mate, we eventually got to eat later on. And this was the deal. And to this day, if you think about our leaders and those in sort of higher power, we have no problem with them getting advantages, first choice of meat or mate. We have no problem with somebody more senior than us getting the big corner office. We have no problem with somebody sort of more advanced in their career than us, sort of driving a nicer car. We have no problem with the celebrity getting the pretty girl. Like, we don't have a problem with our alphas, with our leaders getting advantages, you know, getting first choice of meat or mate, getting treated better. We have no issue with it. But here's the problem, and here's what most leaders completely forget. Yes, as a leader, you get advantages. Yes, as a leader, you get treated differently and treated better and getting all of these first choices of meat or mate. And in return, all of this love and adoration you get from the group fills you with serotonin, this feeling of pride and status. And you all walk around like this when you have serotonin in your body. You feel good, right? It fills you up not only with the feeling of status and pride, but it fills you with confidence. And this is just the point. Right? We give our leaders extra confidence for a very simple reason. Because when there is a threat from the outside that would challenge our group, that would threaten our group, it's this person who is actually stronger, who now has more confidence, that is supposed to stand up in the face of that threat to protect the rest of us. And this is the deal with leadership. It is not a rank, it is not a role, it is a responsibility. The leader may actually get killed first, which is why we want them to have first choice of mate. We want those genes to continue in our gene pool. And this is what is so often forgotten in our modern day world. All those people who aspire for leadership, so many people who aspire for leadership, they want all the advantages and all the trappings and all of the first choices that come. They want the pride, the status, they want all the adoration that comes with the leadership role. But what they're not willing to do is to sacrifice themselves for the good of others. And this is what leadership is. We have to know that you are willing to protect us, which is why we will help you build your vision. We have to know that in the face of threat that you would put your own body in harm's way, you would put your own career on the line, which is why we are willing to give you our blood, our sweat, and our tears to see that your vision comes to life. In the Marine Corps, at the same place in Quantico, Virginia, you will never hear an officer say, "I'm a leader. I believe I have what it takes to be a leader, and I aspire to be a great leader." You will never hear those words coming out of a Marine officer's mouth. What you will hear is, "I'm a leader of Marines. I want to be a leader of Marines. I aspire to be a leader of Marines. I believe I have what it takes to be a leader of Marines." They always add "of Marines" to the end of the word leader. In other words, they know that leadership is for someone. It's not for me. It's not a place I hold, it's not a flag I hold, it is responsibility for others. If you think about it, a company or a corporation is a modern day invention. Even the nation state is a modern day invention. But there's only one thing that has predated all of these things: the family. A great leader is much like a parent, where they put themselves in harm's way to see that their children will be protected. They give everything they've got to their children, resources and skills. They're there to help them up if they need it. Sometimes they let them lift themselves up. Sometimes they have to discipline them. These things are all allowed in a leadership position. The difference is, it starts with absolute and unconditional love. This is why we have to be very, very careful who we let into our organizations. We have to be very, very careful when we're hiring people. It's much like adopting a child. Your business or your organization is not like a family, it is a family. Hiring somebody or bringing someone into an organization is like adopting a child. If you want to adopt a child, what are you going to do? You say, well, I'm looking for a kid about this high with blonde hair and blue eyes. Check, I'll take that one. That's not how we do it. That's how we do it when we hire people, though. We're looking for a certain skill set, we look at their resume, we had a decent interview, you're hired. We hire too quickly. If you're going to let someone into your family, you're going to give them keys to your home to use your stuff when you're not there, you may even give them responsibility. You may even give them responsibility over your other children, to look after your other children. You're going to spend a lot of time getting to know that child, finding out who they are. Do we get along with them? Do they get along with us? Before we let them into our family, it's exactly the same. And the reason is simple, because the day you join our family, you are automatically given unconditional love. The reason a parent can get away with disciplining their child and the child doesn't sort of run away or quit or go somewhere else is because they know that it's done with unconditional love. Great leaders, no matter what they do for us, no matter how hard they may push us, no matter how nice they are, it's got nothing to do with how nice a leader is. That's not great leadership. It's, do they start with unconditional love? Do they give their people everything, and are they willing to put themselves in harm's way so that their people and their organization and their group will continue to grow? This is why they've earned the right to get first choice of meat and first choice of mate. It is not simply because they are stronger. It is not simply because they're smarter. It's because they are in service to others. This is what leadership is. It is a responsibility, and it is service to others.